Yeah, so this is the kickoff session of the new postdoc program. I want to bring to the stage Dr. Bill Curry. He will be the session chair. Bill is a professor and associate dean for research and engagement at SEAS, and is also the co-director of this program.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everyone. So this is a really exciting session about this new AI in Science postdoctoral program. I'm going to introduce you to the director of the program, and then we're going to hear 10 talks. The first 4 will be 15 minutes, and then the next 6 will be lightning talks. We're going to try really hard to keep people to the strict time. So to the speakers, if you could look at Tim, who's sitting right here, he's going to hold up a little sign for 2 minutes and 1 minute, and then the end of time. I think it's unlikely we're going to have time for questions, given that we're going to be doing 10 talks quickly. So if you could hold your questions to the end. And with that, I'm going to start by introducing H.V. Jagadish, Distinguished University Professor, Director of MIDAS, and Director of the new Schmidt AI in Science postdoctoral program.
Thank you, Bill. I just wanted to say a little bit about this program. You already met Bill and Jing, and the three of us, Bill, Jing, and I, are directing this program. Just a few things. This is a campus-wide program across the University of Michigan. It's funded by Schmidt Futures. The formal name is very, very long. This program has MIDAS as the administrative unit who's managing the program. The fellows that we bring in will be working in a whole range of disciplines, and we'll be splitting time between MIDAS and the departments or labs that they're working in. The size of the program is going to allow us to have about 60 or so new fellows over the next 6 years, so about 10 new fellows each year, assuming 2-year appointments. So in terms of the features of the program, we are expecting each fellow to have 2 mentors, one designated as a science mentor and one designated as an AI mentor. The other aspect of this program is that part of the program is to develop a close-knit learning community, and part of what MIDAS will be doing in this regard is providing a foundation for that community. And so participation in this learning community is a part of participating in this program. I guess my point is that this is a program that is right for people who want to be part of the program, and it comes with obligations that will reward, that I hope you'll find rewarding if you're thinking about, people who are thinking about these fellowships. So I want to recognize Mark Garrett, the program manager, who's sitting over here. You met the other team already. We have a very distinguished advisory committee helping us design the program and deliver it as best as we can. The scientific scope of the program, and this is really dictated by the funder, is AI is defined very, very broadly. It includes not just machine learning, but it includes Bayesian inference, it includes even simulation, many parts of robotics and so on. The application domains to which this broad definition of AI should be applied is specifically the domains listed here. And so there are two things to take away from this. First, pure theory or methodology development is not in scope. So when somebody is doing AI research and advancing AI, that is, unless it is tied to a specific application domain, it's not in scope. Tied to an application domain, it is. The other thing is they're explicitly excluding biomedical, health, and social science research from being scientific domains in scope. So this is really towards the basic sciences and engineering as the application domains. That's a pretty big chunk of the university's intellectual endeavor that is not part of that program because of the way the funds are. And so I want to remind people that there is a Michigan Data Science Fellows program that MIDAS has been running for the past few years. This is going to focus on the other MIDAS pillars, and specifically the 3 bullets that you see here, which primarily cover medical, social science disciplines, health disciplines that may not be within the scope for the Schmidt program. We also have our first pillar on responsible data science. And so we're trying to run this program in parallel and on roughly the same time schedule as the larger Schmidt program. And so right now, calls are in the process of being created this week for the next cohort, which will be starting in September 23. So just to take a minute to talk about why people might want to be part of this program. We've got, UM is a top public university with a great deal of excellence across disciplines. We have a very strong data science and AI community, and perhaps most importantly, we have a collaborative culture that we're all proud of. The program itself requires what we're calling individualized development plans, because few people will come in with, even though people are coming in with PhDs, it'll be in some discipline, and depending on what discipline it is, they may lack sufficient AI skills or sufficient domain knowledge to be able to make the kind of progress that they'd like to make towards applying AI techniques for scientific breakthroughs. And so our goal is to provide support for these individualized development plans and a number of ways in which one can put these things together. And we're creating collaborative learning opportunities for the fellows during the program. In doing all of this, we're working closely with other organizations on campus that have missions that are complementary to ours and related to this. I especially want to call out the AI Lab in Computer Science and Engineering, the Michigan Institute for Computational Discovery and Engineering, the Michigan Center for Applied and Interdisciplinary Math. You'll hear from some of these and other groups this afternoon. If I didn't list your unit here, and there are things that we should be talking about, or some, then please do let us know. Also, there's a question of, this program is supposed to really be a program that is a large program that is beneficial to the university as a whole, and not just to the 10 new fellows coming in each year. And so, for example, if you're developing tutorials, training materials, and so on, these would be of value potentially to people not in the program. And our intention is to try to make these available. Similarly, we're hoping that we can develop some research connections and collaborations that go beyond the specific fellow and their 2 or 3 mentors. And so if you have thoughts on what we could do in this regard, please let us know. We'd really be keen to learn your ideas. So just a couple more things I want to say. The Schmidt Futures Foundation is really investing very heavily in this area of AI for science and engineering, and in addition to us, they've funded several other sites that I've named here. We will collaborate across these sites and with other partners. And what this means is that for us, in terms of running the program, we will be building relationships with other institutions, and we will be both working with, collaborating with, and competing with some of these other sites. So we would really appreciate your help in terms of making us the best among the group that we're working with. So again, really seek your advice on this. Finally, just the specifics. The 2022 cohort, the call for applications was published a month ago. Application deadline was last week. With less than a month's notice, we've got over 40 applicants for the program. And just on an early skim, the qualifications of most of these applicants is really outstanding. We're working hard on trying to review the applications, so we'll try to get the program rolling by the end of the year. The 2023 cohort, the call for applications will be published this week, and along with the call for applications for the MIDAS Data Science Fellows Program, which I mentioned. The application deadline for that will be Jan 15th, with fellows starting in the fall. So with that, I want to stop talking about the program and get to the fun stuff. So, which is, how does AI enable breakthroughs in science and engineering? And really, there isn't one single answer to this question. There are a lot of creative people in this room, and that's what we are at a university for. And so the answer is up to the imagination of our research community. There are several ideas that we got from the community and that were part of the proposal that we wrote to get this grant. And I'm acknowledging some of the things ideas that colleagues provided us with. This is something that we are building an online connection of, and this is part of creating a whole an ecosystem of AI for science and engineering, which is part of building this program and this community. So if you have examples that you'd like to share with us, we'd be really delighted please send us pointers. What you're going to hear next is a bunch of ideas from several people. As Bill Curry, my co-director and session chair, mentioned. And so I'm going to call up the first speakers. The first presentation is by Ambuj Tewari, who's working with Paul Zimmerman.
We're going to introduce each speaker.
All right, go ahead.
Good morning again, everyone. So we organized this session in part to showcase a broad range of approaches and topics to encourage people to think about the breadth of this program and inspire you to think of creative new approaches and potential new collaborations. Our first speakers are Paul Zimmerman and Ambuj Tewari. We're going to be talking about curriculum and reinforcement learning for molecular conformer sampling.
Thanks, Bill and Jack. It's a wonderful opportunity to speak here. I'll be talking about two methodologies, reinforcement learning and curriculum learning, as we've applied them to the problem of molecular conformer sampling. Paul and I are going to speak about it, but this work would not have been possible without the amazing student team we had, including Tarun, Ziping, Zeke, Runshuan, Josh, and Yifei. And the keynote speaker was talking about consequential list thinking, or thinking about consequences. And it's really something that AI researchers and machine learning researchers have to think about, because often we get too excited about our shiny new tools, new algorithms, and it's easy to get maybe a little bit distracted from what the important problems are. So Paul keeps me honest, at least in my collaborations on chemistry problems. And this is an example where I was super excited about a tool that had just been released. There was a paper from the OpenAI research group about teaching robots in simulations to do backflips. And that also involved some human supervision. I don't even remember what the actual meeting was, but I was so excited about this. We started chatting about this methodology, and Paul mentioned, this problem seems to be about using all these degrees of freedom, different joints in the robot can move, and you want to achieve a certain objective. Why can't we use this for conformer sampling? And he's going to explain the problem a little bit more. And I thought, yeah, it actually can be used. So this is an example of what Jack was saying. Like, we have such an amazing breadth of scientific expertise and AI expertise, and if more of us talk to each other, I hope more such connections will happen. And I'll turn it over to Paul to tell you a little bit about the problem and the methodology.
Thanks, Ambuj. So it's been really great working together because, just to give a really quick anecdote, it was hard for us to divide up these slides. We couldn't just say, this was what I did, and this is what Ambuj did. We really worked together on all these problems. So I'll just quickly introduce the application side. Usually, from the chemical point of view, and people think of molecules, you say, it has some bonds that give it some structures, some properties. It turns out those properties really depend also on the geometry, right? So I'm showing here a protein which has a couple of regions, which people would call disordered, meaning it doesn't have a really well-defined structure. These will change when they're in contact with other proteins, with other molecules, and basically give very specificity for what this protein will do. Just as one example. Another example shown over here is even just a small ring-like molecule. These things are very common. It has a huge ensemble of possible states that it can sit in. And if you were to grab just one structure and then ask what are the properties, or say the thermodynamic properties or the structure property type relationships, you're not going to get anything that's reasonable. You have to look at a diversity of structures that are all sampled through some kind of statistical distribution. So I think you should be looking at this and say, well, okay, these are really small molecules. What if you get bigger ones? Well, the problem only gets worse, and combinatorics will kill you if you're trying to do some kind of computation to determine what this conformational space even looks like. This problem is essentially intractable. So how I want to try to set this up in terms of how one might use tools from data science to think about the conformation problem. The first thing to recognize is there's a huge disparity between what we usually think of common machine learning tools as being able to approach, say internet-style numbers of points where, you know, a million data points may be small. Over in chemistry, my colleagues, if they have a student who's really good at their project, can get you 10 data points in a week, and that's a really good student. Or if you have high throughput experiments, maybe you could actually pull off 10,000 in a year if, again, you're really at it and trying hard. So that gives you about a 1,000,000 to 1 ratio between, say, internet-style data and chemical data. And just to put that into perspective, that's the volume ratio of the sun to the Earth. Earth drawn bigger than it actually is in this figure. Okay, so to approach the combinatorial problem of conformers, we thought, well, you just actually start with not very much data, but you have some chemical structure and you want to start rotating bonds in that structure and trying to move around that space. So we kind of set this up as having an agent and an environment and saying, well, what the agent needs to do is go and explore this environment, right? So you put these two things together and you say, on the fly, I can always rotate some bond in my molecule, and then I can go and ask, you know, what's the reward from this? And I'll get a new state, a new reward, and I can go and do reinforcement learning in the middle. There's some graph neural network that is learning as I'm sampling, and that's the basic idea we want to apply here, especially because we're always going to be in some kind of data-starved regime. Now, to do this right, it seems like you probably can't go after the hardest problems before you've trained your agent, right? Why would you be able to go into one of these combinatorially complex problems and really do anything at all? So we thought, well, actually, we should teach the agent how to do simple things, right? And if it can do simple things, we can teach it to do something a little harder and a little harder and a little harder. And this idea is curriculum learning, okay? So this is the same way we teach students, so we might as well use it in the ML or RL context. And then the idea in here is you take, say, how Ambuj knows how to set up reinforcement learning algorithms and how I can come up with a sequence of molecules of increasing complexity and pull these things together and really see if you can get the RL agent trained as quickly as possible with as little data as possible. And without getting too far into the weeds, we see exactly that. We are taking models of increasing complexity on the y-axis. The y-axis is basically the performance of the agent in sampling those conformers. And so if you're trying to target the longest, most complicated polymer of this series, and you train on the simplest model, well, that doesn't work very well. But if you train in, say, an intermediate quality model, you actually are doing really well at the complicated one, right? So you kind of think of when you have the simpler models, they work kind of in the target space where things are simpler, and then you continue building off to the right. And generally speaking, once the training model is good enough, you've done well enough for training, and you can actually transfer the RL agent to work in pretty much all of these. I'll turn things back over to Ambuj.
Yeah, so as Paul was saying, these problems are combinatorially intractable. So we chose a model system, lignin, which is a polymer with 8 monomeric units. It's a family of polymers. The one we used had 8 units. And it's 56 torsion angles, so that's out of the scope of just vanilla methods. So conventional molecular dynamics and open source RDKits, ETK-DG method, they just don't work on this system. It's large enough to be non-trivial. And we released this work. We published this work in NeurIPS in, actually the year is wrong, it's 2020, not 2022. But in 2022, we also released the open source, the software, and had a software note in Journal of Computational Chemistry. And again, from the AI and science program point of view, I think it's important to target both communities. The methodology published in AI and ML conferences, and then the scientific message has to be gotten out to the scientific community, which in this case is chemistry. Just one very quick slide on results. We also ran a very enhanced version of MD, which takes a lot of time, but it lets us sample 10,000 conformers. As you can see, the time taken is 277 CPU hours. And the score on the rightmost column is a normalized score. So by definition, enhanced MD has a score of 1. So all of the numbers have to be interpreted relative to enhanced MD. And you can see that our method called torsion net is actually doing slightly better in terms of this Gibbs score, which has a thermodynamic foundation. And it is doing it a fraction of the CPU time. And again, another indication of the combinatorial complexity of the problem is the fact that confab, which is a systematic combinatorial generator of conformers, is not able to do a very good job. It doesn't take that much time, but as you can see, its Gibbs score is pretty low. As Richard Hamming said, the purpose of computing is not numbers, it's insight. So it's also important to not just end with publishing papers in the machine learning conferences with numbers and tables, but also getting tools in the hand of chemists to use some of these things. So we have built a tool where you can take a set of conformer ensembles generated by our torsion net method and examine things like what's the distribution of various quantities over the ensemble of conformers, and chemists can zoom into a particular member of the conformer ensemble and magnify and see. In particular, chemists are often interested in mechanistic hypothesis, like why does a particular reaction work or not work, and oftentimes it depends on whether two functional groups will come close enough to each other. And here's a screenshot of our tool looking at the set of conformers generated by torsion net on lignin, and really looking at the middle diagram here is looking at the energies on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we are looking at each dot here is one of the conformers from our set of conformers, and on the x-axis we are looking at how close are the two functional groups of interest in that particular conformer. And such plots can help chemists either accept or refute a particular reaction mechanism hypothesis they might have. Going forward, we want to scale this to larger systems, and more ideas will be needed, maybe other deep learning architectures, maybe ideas from hierarchical reinforcement learning. And one thing we are really interested these days is going beyond AlphaFold. Most of you probably know about the stunning breakthrough that happened in structural biology, where AlphaFold 2 is able to predict structures of pretty much every protein, and they have uploaded them on a publicly available website. But one thing it cannot do is handle the types of proteins that Paul showed initially, proteins that have a large chunk of the region which is disordered, or even the entire protein might be disordered. So these are called intrinsically disordered proteins. This is in fact a new category in the current CASP competition, and we believe that not torsion net, but torsion-like ideas can help us scale to these large proteins and generating entire conformer ensembles as opposed to just one unique structure. With that, thank you all for listening.